In the darkest days of war, one man risked everything to save 1,000 lives.
War has a grim habit of revealing the worst of humanity. It conjures monsters from the shadows and gives them power. It is a story of darkness, of chaos, and of loss. But every so often, in the deepest part of that darkness, it also reveals the extraordinary. It finds the most unlikely individuals and thrusts them into roles they were never meant to play. This is not a story about a soldier. It is not about a politician or a spy in the traditional sense. This is a story about a man who, by every measure, should have been a villain. He was a member of the Nazi Party, a war profiteer, a hedonist who loved liquor, fast talk, and the company of beautiful women. He was a man who, by all accounts, walked into the heart of the Holocaust and chose to profit from it. And yet, by the end of the Second World War, this same man would be penniless, a fugitive, and wanted for his affiliation with the regime he had so eagerly joined. He would also be a hero. This is the story of Oskar Schindler and how one of the most flawed men in history executed one of the most profound acts of good, saving more than 1,000 lives from the gas chambers of Auschwitz. Our story begins in 1939, in Krakow, Poland. The Nazi invasion is complete. Poland has fallen. For the city's Jewish population, the world has shrunk to the size of a few cramped city blocks, the newly formed Krakow ghetto. For the German invaders and those willing to collaborate, Poland is a land of opportunity. And Oskar Schindler was above all a man of opportunity. He was a German businessman from Czechoslovakia, a member of the Nazi Party since 1939, and an agent for the Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence. He arrived in Krakow with a suitcase, boundless charisma, and a predatory instinct for a good deal. He saw a city ripe for the picking. He quickly set his sights on a bankrupt enamelware factory, the Deutsche Emailwand Fabrik. Through a combination of schmoozing, bribery, and the newly established Nazi laws that dispossessed Jews of their property, Schindler acquired the factory for a pittance. He renamed it Emalia. Schindler was not a brilliant industrialist, but he was a brilliant showman. He knew how to work a room, how to grease the wheels of bureaucracy, and how to make friends in the highest and lowest of places. His factory, Emalia, was soon booming, producing pots and pans for the German war effort. And he needed a workforce. The cheapest, most available labor was right there, trapped inside the ghetto. This is where Schindler's story could have ended. He could have been just another Kriegsgewinner, a war profiteer getting rich off the misery of others. He ran his factory using Jewish labor, leveraging their desperate situation for his own gain. He was, at this point, not a savior. He was an exploiter. To manage the books, he was introduced to a Jewish accountant named Itzhak Stern. Stern was a man of quiet dignity and intelligence. He immediately saw Schindler for what he was, a charismatic, amoral opportunist. But Stern also saw an angle. Schindler wasn't an ideologue. He didn't seem to care about the anti-Semitic dogma of the party. He just cared about money. Stern realized he could use Schindler's greed. He began convincing Schindler that Jewish workers were not only cheaper, but essential to his business's success. More than that, by designating them as skilled essential workers for his factory, they would be protected from the worst of the SS's transports to the death camps. At first, Schindler agreed because it was good business. It kept his workforce stable. He didn't have to train new people. But to protect his workers, he had to see them. He had to know their names. He had to argue for them. He had to look the SS officers in the eye and lie, claiming that this jeweler was a master metalworker, or that a classical musician was a vital munitions expert. And day by day, as he intervened, something began to shift. The abstract labor force was becoming a collection of human faces. The definitive turning point came in March of 1943. The SS command, under the leadership of a new, ruthless commandant, decided to liquidate the Krakow ghetto entirely. The remaining inhabitants were to be moved to the new, brutal concentration camp at Plaszow. The commandant's name was Amon Goat. Amon Goat was everything Schindler was not. He was a true believer, a sadist who took profound personal pleasure in terror. He was the monster that the Nazi ideology was designed to create. From the balcony of his villa overlooking the Plaszow camp, he would often use his high-powered sniper rifle to shoot random prisoners for sport before breakfast. The liquidation of the ghetto was a public and horrific display of this cruelty. Schindler, watching from a hilltop with his girlfriend, saw the reality of the system he had so eagerly joined. He saw families torn apart, people shot in the street for moving too slowly. The sheer mechanized inhumanity of it all. This was the moment that historians credit as Schindler's awakening. The abstract horror of war became a tangible personal reality. The profiteer was witnessing firsthand the true cost of his comfortable life. He realized his factory, Emalia, was more than a business. It was a sanctuary. Schindler's relationship with Amon Goat is one of the strangest and most critical parts of this story. On the surface, they were friends. They had to be. Schindler, the suave businessman, and Goat, the brutal camp commandant, would drink together, attend parties, and exchange pleasantries. But underneath this facade, a deadly game was being played. Schindler recognized that Goat, for all his cruelty, was profoundly corrupt. He had two weaknesses: bribery and flattery. Oskar Schindler was a master of both. He began a campaign of calculated friendship. He showered Goat with gifts: rare brandy, boxes of cigars, diamonds, and vast sums of black market cash. He presented himself as an equal, a fellow cynic, a man who understood the necessities of the New World Order. And all the while, he was using this friendship for one purpose: to pull his workers out of Goat's immediate grasp. He argued, successfully, that his essential workers should be moved out of the main Plaszow camp. He proposed building a new sub-camp on the grounds of his factory, Emalia. He claimed it was for efficiency. The SS, blinded by Schindler's bribes, agreed. This was a masterstroke. Inside the walls of Emalia, Schindler was king. His factory became an oasis. While just miles away, Goat was murdering people at whim. Inside Emalia, the Schindler Juden, or Schindler's Jews, were relatively safe. The guards were still SS, but Schindler had a policy. He kept them busy. He plied them with liquor, bribed them, and ordered them to stay out of the factory floor. He famously told his foreman, "Here, I am the authority." He ordered extra food on the black market, smuggling it in at great personal risk. He forbade violence. He turned a blind eye to his workers, sabotaging the cookware they were making for the German army. When the SS conducted inspections, Schindler would stage a brilliant performance, shouting at his workers, acting the part of a harsh taskmaster until the inspectors left, at which point he'd often give a subtle wink. He was walking a tightrope 24 hours a day for years. He was arrested 3 times by the Gestapo on suspicion of corruption and for being a Jew kisser. Each time, he used his connections, his charm, and more bribes to get himself released, immediately returning to his factory.
1844, the game changed. The Red Army was advancing from the east. The Nazis were in full retreat, and in their panic, they accelerated their darkest project, the final solution. The order came down from high command. Plaszow was to be liquidated. All remaining prisoners, including the workers at Emalia, were to be sent to relocation camps in the west. Everyone knew what that meant. Relocation was a one-way trip to the gas chambers of Auschwitz-Birkenau. For Schindler, this was the moment of truth. His factory, his money, his connections, it was all for nothing if he couldn't save them now. He had spent his fortune buying their lives, day by day. Now, he had to buy their future. He went to Goth, not with a small bribe, but with a proposal of breathtaking audacity. He claimed he wanted to move his entire factory, his essential war production, from Krakow to a new location in Brunlitz, Czechoslovakia, his homeland. And, of course, he would need to take his entire workforce of skilled laborers with him. This was an insane request. The German war machine was collapsing. The last thing they needed was to move an entire, non-essential enamelware factory. So Schindler changed the story. He told the high command that Emilia would no longer make pots and pans. It would be converted into a vital armaments and munitions factory. The SS command, desperate for any good news and with their palms already greased by Schindler's remaining fortune, approved the move. But it wasn't enough. Schindler didn't just need approval, he needed the list. He and Itzhak Stern sat down in an office and began to type. This wasn't a business ledger. It was a list of names. Each name was a human soul, a life to be saved. Stern typed, name after name. Husbands, wives, children, parents. They added the names of people who had never set foot in the factory. Doctors, teachers, rabbis. Schindler, standing over him, kept repeating, more, more. They compiled a list of over 1,100 names. Schindler then took this list to the SS headquarters, and with the last of his black market diamonds, he bought every single person on it. He paid per head to have them transferred from the death ledger of Plossov to the life ledger of his new factory. It was one of the single most expensive and most heroic administrative acts in history. The journey to Brunlitz was a nightmare. The men, packed into cattle cars, made it directly, but the transport carrying over 300 of the Schindler-Juden women was accidentally diverted. It was sent straight to Auschwitz. When Schindler heard the news, he didn't hesitate. He raced to Auschwitz himself, armed with a final, desperate cache of bribes. He found the commandant, flattered him, offered him brandy, and demanded the release of his essential workers. The Auschwitz commandant was stunned. No one asked for prisoners back. It was unheard of. But Schindler, exuding confidence, explained that these workers were part of a top-secret armament program, vital to the Führer himself. To lose them would be treason. And just in case, he offered a few diamonds. The gamble worked. The gates of Auschwitz opened and the 300 women were marched out, back onto a train and sent to the safety of Brunlitz. It is the only known instance in the history of the Holocaust of a large group of people being taken out of the Auschwitz death camp and surviving. The new factory in Brunlitz was a complete and total sham. For the last 7 months of the war, Schindler's armaments factory operated with one goal: to protect the 1,200 people inside its walls. It produced nothing. Schindler, the master con artist, used his skills for his greatest con. He sabotaged his home production line. He fabricated reports. He told the SS that his factory shells failed quality control tests. He bankrupted himself buying faulty raw materials. He spent the last of his money on black market food, medicine, and warm clothing for his workers. He kept the SS guards drunk, distracted, and out of the main factory. He had created a tiny, functioning loophole of life in a continent dedicated to death. On May 8th, 1945, the war in Europe was over. That night, Oskar Schindler, a member of the Nazi Party, a fugitive from the victorious Allies, and a traitor to the regime he once served, gathered his workers on the factory floor. He told them the news. They were free. But he was not. He was now a wanted man. He and his wife, Emilia, had to flee. His workers, with nothing left in the world, spent their last hours in the factory in a single act of gratitude. They crafted a letter of testimony, explaining who he was and what he had done. And using gold from a dental filling, one of the jewelers he had saved, melted it down and crafted a ring. They inscribed on it a line from the Talmud: "He who saves one life saves the world entire." They gave him the ring and the letter. They also gave him a prison uniform as a disguise, and a small group of his workers escorted him, protecting him now as he slipped away into the night just hours ahead of the liberating Red Army. Oskar Schindler's post-war life was not a happy one. The same qualities that made him a brilliant improvisational savior in wartime made him a terrible peacetime businessman. He failed at every venture he tried. He and Amelia separated. He lived in poverty, supported by care packages and donations from the very people he had saved, the Schindler-Juden, who had spread across the world. He died in 1974, virtually unknown to the public. He was buried in Jerusalem on Mount Zion, the only member of the Nazi Party to be so honored. He had been officially named by Yad Vashem, Israel's Holocaust memorial, as one of the righteous among the nations. So, who was Oskar Schindler? He was not a good man, not in the simple storybook sense. He was a gambler, a drunkard, a serial adulterer, and a profound opportunist. He was, in every way, a deeply flawed human being. But perhaps that is what makes his story so powerful. It teaches us that heroism is not the absence of fear or greed or vice. It is the capacity to act despite them. It is the recognition that, in a time of absolute moral collapse, the only thing that matters is the choice you make. Oskar Schindler saw the darkness, and for a long time, he was part of it. But when the defining moment of his life arrived, when he was faced with an unambiguous evil, this flawed, selfish, complicated man made the right choice. He made it 1,200 times. The 1,200 Schindler-Juden have, in the decades since, grown into a thriving legacy of children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Today, their descendants number over 8,000. Oskar Schindler didn't just save 1,000 lives. He saved their entire future. He saved the world entire.